Hello, this is Paul Chek. Today I'd like to help you understand your nature, and the title of our blog today is Understanding Your Nature. Now, what I've found is that a lot of people are confused in our culture about health and wellness of all forms, largely because they don't have adequate knowledge of the basics nor practice of the basics. Remember, if you don't practice the basics, then you can't really have authentic knowledge. You can only have ideas about the basics. And we're in an intellectual culture that does not esteem the basics. People don't think of water as something important or essential. They just assume or ignore it. They don't think of sleep as something important or essential. They often get by with little of it, and getting by is not thriving and being vital. If you study almost any sport, you'll see that when you see interviews with champions, especially martial artists and people of that nature, combative athletes, when their champions are interviewed and asked what do they say the key to their success is, one of the most frequent things you're going to hear is, I stuck to the basics, or I spent a lot of time mastering the basics, whether it be wrestling coaches, martial arts coaches, even basketball coaches. The basics are the foundation upon which our knowledge is built. So today I'd like to share some of the most important essentials or fundamental principles of nature. And what I'm going to share applies to all living things in nature, not just human beings. And this is important because if you look in nature, you'll see that whenever we distort these fundamentals, you end up with illness in nature, whether it be cancer in trees or sickness in animals or the destruction of a certain species, such as when we're wiping things out by overexposing them to chemicals or overfishing or overhunting. So there's a natural process in nature of which we're part of, and by just understanding these fundamentals of how nature creates itself, you can really go a long ways to being more natural in your own recreation of yourself each day. So the four phases that I've highlighted that everything goes through: absorption. Here you see the yin symbol, which means to draw in and to multiply power, or to regenerate and rebuild yourself. So absorption is followed by assimilation. The assimilation process begins the process of active discharge, which is always got to be followed by some form of rest, depending on how you're looking at it. You know, if you're looking at an insect, for example, you might have a different cycle of rest or use of rest than you would with a deer, a cow, or a human being. But all of these key elements have to be in place, or life does not function very well, or just completely collapses or obliterates itself. So again, absorption, assimilation, discharge, and rest. So now let's take a quick look at some of the key components so that you can maybe use this knowledge in your own life to take stock of how well you're doing with your own absorption, assimilation, discharge, and rest. So when it comes to absorption, which means to bring in, every time you inhale, you're absorbing oxygen and a life force energy called prana from the atmosphere, and oxygen is extremely important to your survival. Your average person breathes 25,900 times a day, and oxygen is considered the most essential nutrient because you only have about 3 minutes without it before you start seeing progressive brain death. You can get by without food longer than that. You can get by without water longer than that. You can get by without sleep longer than that, etc. So what we see is oxygen is an essential form of energy and nutrient that we must absorb in order to have the energy for assimilation and have something to discharge. So when it comes to absorption, we need, aside from the obvious of breathing, which unfortunately things that are obvious aren't so obvious anymore, such as I need to breathe, I need to eat real food, I need to sleep. It's a good idea, as I've said many times in my presentations, to be clear about what you want to absorb so that you are actually absorbing things that can be effectively utilized in the creation of your dream, or the body that you want, or the emotional state that you want, or having the thoughts, informations, ideas, and mental potential that you want. So first, what is my dream? Because that's what's going to determine the 4 Dr. Core values that you're going to establish for yourself. If your dream is to be an elite athlete, you're going to have values around quiet diet, movement, and happiness that are affirmative of a lot of training and a lot of discipline. But if your dream is just to have fun in life and play with your kids, then your values are going to probably have more room for laxity and staying up and watching late night television now and then, or drinking a little extra alcohol or whatever. That's not going to be as detrimental in the long run, provided you don't disturb your natural physiological balance, which would then distort your dream regardless of who you are, unless your dream is to be uncomfortable. So once we know what our dream is and we have values, we have to always ask ourselves, am I in or out of functional balance or homeostasis? So essentially when we're in balance, we're healthy people. Our immune systems work well. We breathe well. We have healthy urination, defecation, and digestion, assimilation, and elimination in general. Our thoughts and emotions are not polarized to either extremes. We have the ability to go with the ebbs and flows of life. Our body doesn't hurt. Our posture is within normal or ideal range so that our joints can work and we can move effectively. Our emotions should be stable in that, yes, we should have the capacity for anger as needed, and the capacity for empathy, and the capacity for joy, and even the capacity for fear when fear is intelligent, right? If you're going to stick your hand near an alligator's mouth, you might want to have some healthy fear. If you're going to try to make physical contact with a rattlesnake, fear might be a good thing to add to some very fast reflexes and even questioning whether or not that's intelligent. So we always have to look at ourselves, whether we're having symptoms that are actually dream negative. Am I constantly frustrated because my skin doesn't look good? Am I constantly frustrated because my muscles hurt? Or I've got arthritic pains, or I'm tired all the time. Those are all indicators of being out of balance. If you're in balance, then you really forget that you even have a body until you bang into something or stub your toe, and you feel like you're at one with the flow of the creation of your own life and your own experience. And then 3, we have to make choices about what we're going to absorb, because if you just eat and consume willy-nilly and don't pay attention, and worse yet, believe what they say is scientifically validated, you're probably going to be in trouble. I'm not saying not to respect science. I'm just saying, remember, science has validated almost everything that's killed thousands and thousands of people as in the form of various foods, food additives, preservatives, colorings, drugs, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, and the list just goes on. And science tells you that fluoride's good for you in your water, yet better science tells you that it's not. So when it comes to making decisions about what you're going to absorb, you have to not only trust science, but have a relationship with your body, because it's constantly mirroring back to you the results of your choices. So when it comes to absorption, some of the physical things that we need to consider with absorption, we must have good breathing. We must have adequate hydration with quality water. We must eat real food, preferably whole food, and adequate amounts of raw food, so that our bodies are getting a good source of energy and nutrients and the building blocks that have not been overly processed. And naturally, that food should be organic or biodynamically farmed, or it's going to be toxic and nutrient deficient. We have to have movement in order to acquire adequate energy. Movement gives us a lot of energy. Many of you will have experienced going to the gym and leaving with more energy, or feeling sluggish and tired and going for a walk and then feeling perked up and better. I could give a very long lecture on all the ways movement gives us energy, but some examples are it produces kinetic energy, thermal energy, hydroelectric energy, piezoelectric energy, and those are just a few of the ways movement gives us energy. Emotional, we absorb energy, and emotions are energy that organizes or has an influential field on the body-mind. In other words, emotional energy is an organizing force. The emotional energies can be so strong it can completely shift us. For example, you can be having a great day and all of a sudden show up at work and find out that somebody that you know or loved has just died, and the emotions of the experience completely disorganized everything that you thought you were going to do that day. You can come home to see your partner and think you're going to have a great evening together. The next thing you know, you're in a scrap about something, and all your plans to do whatever you were going to do this evening are now out the window because you've absorbed a lot of negative emotional energy. So we want to be conscious about who we're with and what kind of emotions that we emit, because like attracts like. So if you're full of negative emotions and insecurities, you're likely to attract people that very much look like that and act like that, and so you'll be swimming in that kind of energy. Then mental or thoughts. Thoughts relate to things, for example, ideas. So we want to be careful about what we absorb as ideas. I recently did a blog on masturbation. A lot of people have absorbed all sorts of strange ideas about masturbation and what God wants and what the Pope wants and what Jesus wants and every other thing under the sun. People, again, absorb ideas from science. This pill will do this for you, etc., etc. So we have to be careful to always ask ourselves, how is that working for the people that are absorbing those kinds of thoughts and applying them in their life? And how is it working in me? Even if it works for someone else does not mean it's going to work for you. So pay attention to the symptoms that you're getting physically, emotionally, and mentally. And if it's moving you in line with your dream, then keep going. And if it's not, then you have some reevaluation to do, because if you keep putting the wrong types of energy and information in the absorption phase, all the other phases will mirror that imbalance. Next, we want to go to assimilation. Assimilation is the process of recreating one's self, your physical self, as well as your emotional and mental self, from what is absorbed. So just as you can't make your body out of something that you haven't eaten, you can't have positive or negative effects in the assimilation phase from something that you haven't learned, or if you are absorbing negative thoughts, then you're going to have to assimilate negative thoughts, which is going to require a tremendous amount of energy, particularly if those thoughts are antagonistic to your dream. You'll spend a lot of power in the assimilation process, which can be draining. Most of you are aware of that, because if you've ever had a drug addict in the family, or lived with somebody that's hard to deal with, or had chronically challenging relationships in your family or at work, you have to assimilate that every day, and it can be very, very exhausting. So again, when we come to the physical, emotional, and mental of the assimilation process, ask yourself before you eat it, is it digestible? Ask yourself, when it comes to emotional components of relationships between self and other, or person, place, or thing. Remember, we can have emotional relationships with persons, with places, and with things. So a lot of addictions, for example, are addictions to things like coffee, drugs, money, power, whatever it might be. So ask yourself, is this something that I can effectively assimilate and put into my being and move me toward the dream that I want to experience on a day-by-day basis? So can it be assimilated physically, emotionally, or mentally to create what I want? Always ask that question. And if you just sit for a minute and think of some of the challenging relationships or experiences you've had in the past, think about how much time you had to spend assimilating. Like, why did this person treat me this way? Or why did I treat that person that way? And you'll find that assimilation takes a lot of energy, and if we don't do it, we tend to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, And then we can get to the point where we think no one likes us, the world's a shitty place, and then you might be having conversations with God about how did I get stuck here, and you'll have your little poor me fiddle going, and that leads to somebody that's very hard to be around. And then finally, third, we have discharge. So we're going to take what we absorb and assimilate, and we're going to discharge it as physical energy. So the energy to move, the energy to breathe, the energy to digest, eliminate, etc. All the functions of your cells all require energy, and there's all got to be a discharge. Energy has to move. You can't run your phone without discharging the battery. A cell can't live without absorption of energy, assimilation of energy, or it can never reach the discharge phase. So the physical discharge, when we're at the physical level, we have to pay close attention, because if you're discharging too much energy relative to what you can absorb and assimilate, then you end up burning your adrenal glands out or becoming a chronic fatigue person, or a person that has chronic illnesses or depression and things like that. Also, if you over discharge, then you burn yourself out. If you under discharge, you become too sedentary and you suffer the effects of everything from clogged arteries to constipation to menstrual cycle irregularities to fungal infections, parasite infections, and the list goes on and on. So we have to look at our emotional discharge. You're going to, if somebody's treating you with love and nurture, you're almost always naturally going to discharge with emotional energy that correlates to love and nurture. If someone's abusing you, it takes a lot more assimilation power to stay connected to that person and to handle them in a way that is loving, but you'll never have the power of assimilating challenging relationships with people, places, and things if you're absorbing things that ultimately don't lead to your ability to have a resource of energy and stability in your emotions. And if you don't have clarity of your dream, then you'll never be able to manage yourself in relationships either, because you won't know when holding back is more important than engaging, or how much energy to engage, how much empathy to have, compassion to give, or how vigorous you need to stand up for yourself so that you're not victimized, etc. So physical energy needs to be discharged. If we don't discharge physical energy, then we don't do anything with ourselves and we don't grow. So the discharge process is actually a process of utilizing yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally. Emotional energy fields are very, very important, because as Valerie Hunt shows in her book Infinite Mind, the emotional fields are strong enough to commandeer the mind. So if we're absorbing energy and ineffectively assimilating things that disrupt our emotions, it will affect our mental capacity. And a lot of the people that I see that are having mental challenges actually are coming to me with the symptoms of an emotional instability. In other words, an athlete, for example, that has a temper problem, they often think they have a mental problem, but in general what they have is an emotional problem, which often goes right back to biochemical imbalances and bringing things into their body that are not suitable for a healthy body, which means not suitable for healthy emotions, which means mental dysfunction or cognitive processing challenges. So then we have to be careful with our mental energy, because it's easy to get distracted. We want to discharge our mental energy. Think of your mental energy like the energy coming out the back of a jet engine. If the pilot's not paying attention and using his mind, you can discharge the fuel and end up nowhere, or having to do a crash landing and nothing good comes of that. So the mind element of this is really the organizing principle. Your emotions have the power to either organize the mind field or facilitate the activity of the mind, and your body is what carries that process out. Then we want to remember that we need to include celebration. Celebration is a very, very important part, and the Western culture is so outcome oriented, so task oriented, so go, 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 do, do, do. beat everybody else, be the first on the moon, be the prettiest girl at the party, be the sexiest guy, be the fastest, be the strongest. That this almost childlike addiction to getting attention by doing this or that, which is really a replication of how we got mommy and daddy's attention, leads to a perpetual summer in which you're going from one thing to the next without realizing often that you're constantly trying to get love and nurture that can never replace rest, because those are all active processes. To go out and do at expense of being means that you burn yourself out, but when you look behind it, it's almost always someone's need for love and appreciation that's driving that behavior. So we want to make sure that we celebrate what we're creating, and even if you're having a hard time, you can see I've got a yellow question mark, even if you're having a hard time, as long as you're paying attention and you're learning, that's worth celebrating. Many of the greatest learning experiences I've had have come through various injuries or challenges, or when I was a kid, illnesses, or even I learned a lot because our animals had illnesses, and then I got to learn how the veterinarians handle that and what my father would do. So there's a lot to celebrate on either side of the coin of positive and negative heads or tails, and anything that's negative is worth celebrating to the degree that you gained awareness and have learned from that experience to better manage yourself and recreate your life in a positive way. But if you're not paying attention, then you're going to be, banging your head against the wall, ceaselessly asking someone else to take the pain away. Then we get to this final phase, rest. Everything has to have rest. Physical rest is essential. Emotional rest could come by just disengaging when you need to disengage. I teach my students to always learn to love at safe distance. If you've got a challenging family member, for example, that you find very grating or needy or unappreciative, then you have to learn how to love that person at a distance that's safe for you. It might be email, it might be an occasional phone call, and if even those get to be too challenging, then just holding the space of love and connection to that person in your heart leaves you connected to them. But that's a form of active rest, staying engaged but resting from the entanglement of the kind of relationship that they like to perpetuate but you may not enjoy at all. So we have to give ourselves physical rest. We've got to be brave about taking emotional rest and loving at safe distance, and we have to give ourselves mental rest. Again, we're in a culture and the whole world's becoming poisoned by this intellectual itis. We now have the Chinese acting like Westerners. We now have the whole country of India becoming the giants in computer programming and information processing. So as we see all this sort of identity with thoughts and ideas at the expense of our body and at the expense of nature taking place, it's like what I would call a Western virus is spreading throughout the world, and people forget to rest. They actually keep running their heads day and night, and the more people chase after more, do this degree, that degree, the more they chase after rational, logical pursuits, the more irrational pressure they build up. In other words, if you're a kid in high school or any school, going to school and getting good grades is rational, but to the degree that it's stressful for you and you're not enjoying the experience, or you're being taught in ways that don't suit your learning style, the pressure of the rational has a tendency to charge up the irrational, so you start seeing irrational behavior, skipping school, having to tell lies to compensate, using drugs, having unsafe sexual relationships, and doing, especially in males, doing extreme things, whether it be driving cars too fast, motorcycles, jumping off of cliffs, or everything that young men tend to do. Women can have their own expressions of that, which I won't spend more time going into, but all of you ladies know that you have your own extreme expressions of a lack of rest. So the mental has to be rested as well. So when you look at the cycle, it's really right in the symbol of Tai Chi, yin. We begin with, if you don't absorb, you have nothing to move out as energy. We have to assimilate it to convert it into living tissue or into working emotions or working thoughts that are dream affirmative. We have to discharge, or there's no action. The discharge is the action phase. And then we have to rest and celebrate, and you can consider celebration as part of discharge. I typically don't put it with rest because oftentimes the things we do to celebrate, such as partying, are energy consumptive and actually require us to need more rest. So these are some very, very basic principles that if you pay attention to, what am I absorbing, physically, emotionally, and mentally? Can I effectively assimilate it such that it's dream affirmative and my body looks and feels the way I want it to look, and my life is producing the experiences that I am willing to engage in? And am I discharging back out into the world the kind of love and energy and nurture that I would like back? Right? Remember, if you simply remember to treat other people the way you want to be treated, then you'll find the world a nicer place. And that's why on the discharge here I have a little boomerang with love written on it. Just remember the rule: a boomerang comes back to you. So no matter how hard or how fast you throw it, it's going to loop back to you. And I teach my students that love is a boomerang. Whatever you put out comes back. The child has a tendency to blame it on other people. The adult says, I better learn to throw that boomerang a little bit better and be a little bit more aware, because it hurts when it comes back if I'm not ready for it. So these are very simple principles. I hope you enjoy practicing them. If you want to learn more about how to use simple but powerful principles, you can look at my multimedia ebook, The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need: How to Get Healthy Now, which is available at chekinstitute.com. You can also learn a lot by studying my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, which has a series of questionnaires that identify where your body's out of balance, helps you identify where to start fine-tuning your diet, and gives you the tools to know what it is that you want to absorb, enhance your assimilation, help your discharge, which would also relate to detoxification of the body, and has an entire chapter on rest to teach you how to rest effectively. Also, The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need has some very important information on rest, including active and passive rest, which is not in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. So there you go. That's my little presentation for you today. Understanding your nature. These are things worth meditating on. Take your time. Just look at each of these stages and ask yourself, what am I absorbing physically, emotionally, and mentally? Am I able to assimilate it? In other words, can I put it into meaning in life, and is it contributing to my dream? How am I throwing the boomerang or discharging myself and know that the mirror never lies and neither does your body? And am I celebrating because I'm paying attention and I'm worth celebrating and loving? Me. You got to love and celebrate yourself first. And then am I giving myself enough rest in order to fully engage in that cycle? And know this: if you're not getting enough rest, then this is a spiral. If you're resting and paying attention, you grow and mature and become wiser, healthier, better self-managed, more capable of creating what you want. But if you're not paying attention, you get a left-hand spiral, which is like a drill, in this case, going into the ground. I say left meaning opposite of up, down. So if you drill yourself down, you become more and more unconscious, and that is exactly what it means to create karma for yourself. When you're not paying attention of how you're creating, then life starts to feel lousy, and it will keep happening as long as you create that way. Remember, in order to conceive life in order to live life in ideal terms, you must conceive of it that way, which means you have to have some level of awareness as to what you want. But if you're not paying attention and you're making mistakes, instead of getting more vital, more beautiful, more intelligent, and having more fun, you have less and less fun, you have less and less vitality, you spend more and more time looking for magic pills and doctors to fix all your problems and therapists, and you get more and more unconscious each day, and you're more and more likely to have diseases, accidents, and problems in your life. So thanks for joining me. Very simple. The 4 phases. Never forget them. Always be aware. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. I'm Paul Chek.